Welcome to WPRI.com. I'm Target 12 investigator Tim White, joined by my colleague, 12 News Politics editor Ted Nesi. Ted, we're going to talk about the budget. You just got out of a virtual briefing on the $12.8 billion budget. It's obviously a big dollar amount. We're not going to get into every penny. As a matter of fact, I'm hoping you and I can let the folks watching this get an idea of what's in the budget within a 5-minute period here. But first, I think just structurally, we need to understand what budget we're talking about here, because it is very unusual to, in December, be talking about a budget proposal. So is this one looking backwards?
It's a good point. It's looking backwards and forwards because it's the current fiscal year, which started back on July 1st and goes until June 30th. Usually the budget for that fiscal year would have passed in June, but because of the pandemic, the revenue declines they were facing, all the uncertainty, and frankly, also because incumbents did not want to take unpopular votes on cutting programs or raising taxes before the November election, they punted it. And now they're going to do what they're calling a skinny budget, which doesn't mean it's skinny in dollars, right? It's $12.8 billion, but they're saying it has no big policy proposals or anything like that. So lots of money in this budget, but seemingly not a lot of dramatic shifts in how Rhode Island government operates.
You've covered a lot of budgets over the years. So when you took in this one, what were the big headlines for you?
Well, first, obviously, the caveat, Tim, in true Rhode Island State House fashion, the budget bill has not even been released as we sit here talking, even though it's going to be voted on within the hour, I would expect. But based on the briefing we received and what I've been hearing from sources I've talked to, like I said, the biggest headline is there's not a lot of dramatic things happening in this budget. It's a dramatic number, $12.8 billion. A huge amount of that is federal funds, both the CARES Act money people have been hearing about, as well as the huge amount of additional unemployment benefits that came through the feds, which in the accounting of it actually flow through the state budget, even though the state didn't pay for that, the feds did. So some of the number is, it's not that it's misleading, but it might give a false impression of
little inflated, maybe.
Exactly, in its own way. So, but they say there's no tax or fee increases in this budget. Leader Shekarchi, who's going to be the speaker because Nick Mattiello lost and led the negotiating in the budget, said it was important to him not to raise anybody's taxes or fees, and no programs, as far as I understand it, no programs are being added, and also no programs are being eliminated. So, the governor's original budget proposal for this year, way back in January, which feels like a lifetime ago, had, she wanted to legalize marijuana. She wanted to make the Promise program permanent, had a host of other things she wanted to do. There were taxes that might have gone up to pay for things. None of that's in here, they say. There's just enough funding to cover the programs that already existed, keep them going. There's aid for cities and towns and schools, some increased aid, it sounds like, which again, they used federal money for. But, for the average person, I'd say if this briefing told the full story, I want to get into the full documents when they come out to make sure they're not hiding anything. But if that's the case, I wouldn't expect, the amount you pay in taxes should stay similar for the next 6 months. The fees should stay the same. If there's programs you use or rely on, they should have the same roughly amount of funding, maybe a little bit more. That's what I took away.
All right, so we're at about 3.5 minutes into this video. But if a buddy asked me, what did Ted say about the budget? It sounds like what I'm going to say is, well, not much is changing. You're not going to feel a huge difference. I do wonder, though, people are going to ask about the car tax that Speaker Mattiello has said will phase out over a 5-year period back when he announced that in, 2016? Yeah. So is that still on
That's in there. Phase out? That is a 6-year plan to phase it out. This is the 4th year, this budget, and they say they put in the full amount called for in the original phase out plan. Again, they're kicking every big decision into basically January, which is when the next budget is supposed to be introduced. That's the one for the year that starts next July 1st. So they're saying, look, we're going to be having these debates very soon. We just don't think this budget with a bunch of lame duck lawmakers, some of whom have lost, is the time to make those big decisions.
All right, 2 questions, 1 minute. So we heard about budget deficits because of the pandemic. It initially was going to be, projected to be much worse. It's still, a couple $100 million, a little over. Where's the money coming from to balance the budget?
Federal money is making up, using that CARES Act money. They said they were, quote, creative. I think that means, renaming certain aid to cities and towns maybe as coronavirus help instead of whatever kind of help it was called last year, which means you can now use federal money for it. There's things under the hood that get a little complex, but they're not paying back all the money they took out of the rainy day fund yet. They're going to leave some of that to be paid back later. But I think the main story, as far as I can tell, is going to be about federal money, that gusher of cash that came in back in the spring that they're still using.
Okay, and finally, before we did this video and you came out of the briefing, you told me there's going to be an election in March.
Yes, not like we're if we're all sick of elections. Oh well, this is the bond questions, right? Usually on the November ballot, we see the lawmakers ask, do you want to spend $100 million on upgrading parks or building some new building or something like that. But they didn't do that, again, because they punted the budget, didn't do it in June like usual. So now they're going to call a special election in March, probably March 2nd, when voters will be asked to approve 7 bond questions totaling $400 million. A lot of money on that. They say the balloting will probably happen mostly by mail, like the presidential primary was last year because of COVID. But we'll have a full breakdown on WPR.com, but it's everything from the environment, transportation, money for arts facilities, and that'll be divided into 7 questions for the voters. So yeah, we're gonna have one more election to get through, Rhode Island, before we can see this period through.
Just when you thought it was over. All right, Ted Nesi, as we said, he just got out of the briefing, and he's going over the minute details as we speak. So stick with WPRI.com to learn more.